Clara sprinted across the blistering pavement, feeling the soles of her sneakers soften against the asphalt, a heat matched only by the cold terror prickling at the base of her neck. On that sweltering afternoon, July 14th, 1958, her problem was not failing grades or neighborhood bullies. It was the ancient thing gliding behind her, breathing frost into the humid summer air. Her brother, Leo, stumbled beside her, gasping for air. Without breaking stride, Clara yanked him up by his shirt collar. Trailing just behind was their friend Sophie, who kept glancing over her shoulder with wide, tear-filled eyes. They knew their pursuer was not human, despite the dusty frock coat and the high collar meant to hide an unnaturally long neck. The three children possessed a gift they called the hum, a shared ability to sense impending misfortune and read emotional currents. But today, that gift acted like a beacon, drawing a predator from the old world straight to them. Navigating the labyrinth of Oak Haven's back streets, Clara's mind raced. They cut into a dead-end alleyway, aiming for the storm drains where the town's runoff fed into the swamp. They naively hoped the running water would mask their scent from a creature that hunted by blood. But at the end of the alley stood a towering chain-link fence. Clara hit the mesh first, her fingers scrabbling against the hot metal. Adrenaline propelled them upward. As they tumbled over the top, the entity arrived. It did not climb. It simply walked through the steel mesh as if it were made of mist.
Leo, realizing they were cornered, grabbed a rusted length of pipe from the weeds and charged with a defiant scream, desperate to buy the girl's time. The metal bar passed harmlessly through the creature's shoulder, but the flare of the hum exploding from the boy burned the wraith, forcing it to recoil with a hiss. That split second was enough. The children dove into the gaping concrete maw of the drain pipe, hidden beneath a tangle of kudzu. They thought they had found sanctuary, but as their eyes adjusted to the gloom, they saw the tunnel walls pulsating like living tissue. Far down in the darkness, hovering above the sludge, was not a reflection, but a single floating paper lantern glowing with a sickly amber light. They had fled from a hunter only to run straight into the lair of the landlord, and he did not like trespassers. The situation doubled in horror when the echoing footsteps of their pursuer mingled with a low, wet growl rising from the depths. Clara realized with a sinking heart that they were trapped in a stone throat between two monsters. The wraith, the Withered Guest, as the local legends might have called him, stepped into the tunnel. His aristocratic face twisted in disgust at the stench of decay, but his hunger drove him forward. Then, reality began to fray. The stagnant water beneath their feet thickened into black tar. Dead starlings began to drop from the ceiling, exploding against the concrete with wet thuds. The motley king had awakened. Sensing an intruder on his feeding grounds, the ancient cosmic entity was furious.
The Withered Guest lunged for Sophie, but the space between them stretched impossibly, 3 yards becoming 3 miles of infinite corridor. The children clutched each other's hands, trying to anchor their sanity. Their combined hum created a shimmering, translucent barrier around them. They were crushed between two colossal wills, the vampire's icy mental command to sleep and submit, and the chaotic, shrieking madness of the motley king, demanding they scream and break. Leo cried out as the vampire's shadow detached itself, winding around his leg like a python. Instantly, a massive, white-gloved claw burst from the tunnel wall, severing the shadow to protect its own livestock. The children became spectators to a war not meant for human eyes. The vampire dissolved into a swarm of bats to attack, but the entity countered by shattering it to thousands of cockroaches, reforming into a towering, rag-doll jester behind its enemy. In the chaos,
Clara spotted a narrow service hatch leading to the old pump station. She dragged her friends toward it. They scrambled through, lungs burning, bursting into the circular chamber, only for the heavy iron door to slam shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Scrawled on the wall in fresh blood were the words, "Only one way out," and that way led down. The spark of hope died when they realized the pump station was not a shelter. It was a dinner plate. The air buzzed with static. Suspended over the central abyss were 3 hypnotic lights, rotating slowly. The withered guest, battered and stripping off his human guise, seeped through the cracks of the door.
He was enraged, his skin smoking from the chaotic magic of this place. He decided to end the game, kill the children immediately, and consume their essence to heal. The motley king materialized from the steam rising from the pit. He looked smaller now. Fighting another supernatural apex predator had drained him. This was their only chance. Clara squeezed her friend's hands until her knuckles turned white. She realized their hum was not just a seasoning for these monsters. It was raw energy. "Focus!" she screamed in her mind. The children channeled every ounce of their terror, pain, and will to live into a single beam of psychic radiance. The blast hit the vampire, knocking him back toward the edge of the pit. He hissed, shielding his eyes as his flesh began to char and flake away like ash. Victory seemed within reach. But then, the motley king laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The floor beneath the children vanished. They did not fall. They floated in zero gravity, suspended in the orange glow of the deadlights. The vampire, adapting faster to the magical realm, used the levitation to his advantage. He lunged, grabbing Sophie by the throat, ready to drain her dry right in front of her friends. This was rock bottom. Sophie was choking, her light dimming as it flowed into the intruder's veins. Clara and Leo, drifting helplessly, felt the cold creeping into their own souls. But this absolute despair was the catalyst they needed. Clara remembered her physics. Energy cannot be destroyed, only transferred. She locked eyes with Leo, and without a word, transmitted a desperate plan. They did not attack the vampire. Instead, they aimed their remaining power at the fabric of the dimension itself, creating a vacuum behind the monster. The sudden pressure drop acted like a catapult. The suction ripped the vampire away from Sophie and hurled him straight into the unhinged, multi-dimensional maw of the motley king, which waited at the center of the orange vortex. There was a sickening crunch, not of bone, but of a universe collapsing in on itself. The intruder was swallowed whole, erased from existence by the older, hungrier evil. The children collapsed onto the damp concrete of the real pump station, bruised, exhausted, but alive. The mist cleared, and the jester stood before them. He did not attack. He looked at them with a grotesque expression of satiety. He had devoured the main course, the rival predator, and the children were merely the garnish, leftovers to be saved for later. He offered a slow, theatrical bow and dissolved into the shadows, leaving the exit door unlocked. Clara, Leo, and Sophie walked out into the pouring rain. They had survived. They had won. But as they looked at each other, there was no relief in their eyes, only a vast, gray emptiness. In that battle, amidst the radiation of the deadlights, they had left something vital behind: their childhood, their dreams, and the capacity to feel true joy. They walked home holding hands, 3 little elders in the bodies of children, knowing the monster would return in 27 years. But they also knew they would not care, because inside there was nothing left for it to eat.